Kornheiser was really embarrassing, and it made me late for the coronation. I was sure I could do both.
Yeah, well,
sure I could do both.
You just should have skipped the coronation. I mean, how boring must that have been?
I loved it. I watched about 3 hours of it on television. I loved it. I really did. Thought it was great.
That's one of the lamer statements you've ever made.
No, I enjoyed watching the coronation.
3 hours of the coronation on TV. Your manhood rights ought to be taken away. Taken away. Yeah.
Well, don't worry, because later in the day, I watched the NBA for 6 hours just to get back on an even keel. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the Sixers even things with the Celtics. Leon Draisaitl is on fire, and Jimmy Irsay doesn't want any team talking to Andrew Luck. But we begin today with a weird incident in the Phoenix-Denver game last night, a game Phoenix won to even that series at 2-2. In the second quarter, the ball went out of bounds off a Phoenix player who flew into the seats. The ball landed in the arms of the new Phoenix owner, Matt Ishbia. Denver's Nikola Jokic attempted to quickly take possession of the ball so he could inbound it, perhaps give his team a 5-4 man advantage. Jokic got a technical foul for what appeared to be a shove of Ishbia, though Ishbia appeared to put his hands on Jokic first. Wilbon, should the NBA take further action on either Jokic or Ishbia or both?
No. And Ishbia had the great sense to tweet out this morning, just to put it back in perspective. I don't want him fined. I don't want him suspended. I don't want any of that. And this is funny. And I've communicated with Matt today, and he thinks ought to be a light moment, and it's not. I take exception to your saying that Jokic apparently elbowed Ishbia. I'm sorry. Do you think if Jokic, the size that he is, elbowed your butt at the same size that Ishbia is, about 6 feet, you think you wouldn't go flying? Really? What are you, Iron Man triathlete now? And you wouldn't go back into your seat? Of course you would. But I digress, because when I saw it, I just thought, this is a crazy moment. There's no health and safety of a player in jeopardy here. I mean, he didn't apparently do anything. He did it. He's 7'49" and weighs 300 pounds. Of course, he put a forearm into him like he was in an octagon. It's okay. It's not a federal offense, but let's not act like, oh, maybe it happened.
Well, we use the word apparently for legal purposes when we write these leads. And by we, I mean me. Like, I've seen this thing about 10 times now. I have no idea why Jokic got a technical foul. No, I really don't. I don't think he did anything particularly wrong. I think if this was not the owner of Phoenix, that ball would have been more quickly inbounded. These guys, they're right on the court. There's Ishbia's right on the court, and Ballmer's right on the court. Leonsis in Washington is right on the court. They become part of the game. I don't think they are above the criticism that they shouldn't be holding on to the ball. Now, he sold it. He got hit. He went down backwards. He sold it, and he got the technical. I wouldn't have given them a technical, and I surely, like you, there would be no further punishment for either person. So if they suspend Jokic, that's like a criminal act to me. That's absolutely crazy.
They're not suspending Jokic. They're not.
So can I move on? Can I move on to the game itself?
Yeah.
Can I move into just let me just say this. I sat here last Friday with you, and I said the best case scenario for Phoenix would be to go home, win 2, and make it a 3-game series. Because without Chris Paul, that's hard to do. And I want to praise our friend Tim Legler, who is a great analyst. Tim Legler was on my podcast on Friday, and he said the only way they can win without Paul is if Kevin Durant takes it upon himself to have games like James Harden. Not to score more points than Booker, but together he said they had to score 70. So Harden went out and got, I think, 39 and 36 in those 2 games. That's 75 points.
You mean
and
Durant?
Booker went out and got 47. I mean, Durant. Yes, I'm sorry. And Booker went out and got 47 and 34, which is 81 points.
36.
And had an insane shooting percentage. 34 of 43. And that's together, that's how they won, right? 2 games.
Yes, because they're the best duo right now. And, Jokic and Jamal Murray are terrific. And Harden and Embiid are terrific. And, Curry and whoever you want to combine with him, Klay Thompson, are obviously Hall of Fame terrific. And we can do this for every team. I mean, I depend. Jimmy Butler, he was Rough Rider for him by himself, kind of, sort of. But yeah, Tony, they did. And they are playing themselves. I think the Suns will win tomorrow. And I think they are playing themselves into what you insisted they were from the day the Durant trade was made, which I did not agree with you then. I said to you, Tony, I think you're premature. They could get there. They may. If they win tomorrow, they have a real chance of getting there. But, again, stop with the alleged. Stop with the he sold it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm a little bigger than you. 6'2" to 6 feet, although we're both down in weight. I'm going to give you a shove. And let's see if you go back and I'm going to say, oh, Tony just sold it. Jokic is 7'85". What are you talking about? Seriously. Let's move to the East, where the Sixers even their series with the Celtics at 2 games each. Harden, the aforementioned, scored 42, including the winning 3-point shot in overtime after Jaylen Brown left him to double Joel Embiid in the paint. Tony, where do you want to start, with Harden's performance or Jaylen Brown's defensive decision?
All right, well, I want to start with Joel Embiid, but I'll get to him later. So I'll start with Harden at this point, because Jaylen Brown did the only thing you're supposed to do in that moment. You got the MVP of the league rolling towards a basket in a close game. You got to double. You have to double.
Yeah,
this series is on Harden at this point, not Embiid, Harden. In the 2 games they've won, he scored 45 and 42. In the 2 games they lost, he shot 5 of 28. As they rise or fall, so goes Harden. But make no mistake, Boston should have won this game. Boston made a spirited and a sustained comeback in the 4th quarter, and they took the lead, and the only person that kept Philadelphia in it was Harden, not Embiid. And Boston should have won. I mean, Smart has a good look at the end of regulation. It doesn't go. And if Tatum didn't take 11 and a half of the 12 seconds left to dribble between his legs 19 times and got the ball to Smart a half second earlier, they would have won that game.
You know, Tony, I don't disagree with anything you said, and I agree with the double down situation. You got to stop Embiid there, although, you know, Embiid had become reluctant and was not himself in the 4th. And I don't know if any of that has to do with the knee injury that he's coming back from, or if Al Horford was just in his head renting space. And that could be the case, to be fair, because Horford is a hell of a defender. He knows how to play Embiid. For a long time, he's been doing it. But, Tony, the Celtics don't look to me to be as good as they were last year. And I think it's for a reason. I got to give our friend Charles Barkley credit for this, for mentioning it on his show in real time. He says they've turned into just a 3-point jump shooting team all the time. You got 2 wings like that. You need to be do more than firing off threes. But let me give some credit, speaking of credit, to my man Mike Greenberg, to Greeny, who said to me yesterday on Countdown, hello, why isn't this more about Harden than Embiid? And I shouted him down and said it was insane to think Harden could score 40 points again in these playoffs. And aren't I the fool? Greeny was right, and so was Harden. Tony, I didn't think Harden had that in him. Not a 40-plus, not again after going 5 for 28. He was great. He was great.
The legal pad. Here's your boy, the MVP, Embiid, in the 4th quarter. At home, in a close game. Plays 9 minutes and 23 seconds, has 2 points, 1 rebound, 1 of 6 shooting, because Al Horford ate his lunch, blocked him 3 different times. If you include the overtime, he still only has 1 rebound, and he has that charging foul.
Who had the assist that produced the jump shot that won the game?
Okay, but he was nothing in the 4th quarter.
No, he wasn't.
And James Harden was everything. Let's move to hockey.
Yeah, that's true.
We have a playoff potpourri, and it comes down to 3 situations, and Wilbon, I will eventually ask you, which is the biggest deal? The Florida Panthers going up 3-0 on Toronto. Leon Draisaitl getting 2 more goals for Edmonton, giving him 13 goals in 8 playoff games. Or the draft lottery tonight to determine where projected superstar Connor Bedard will go.
Well, for me, who's got a team in the draft lottery with the 3rd best odds situation, the Chicago Blackhawks, I've been just studying the bottom of the standings for 2 months because the Blackhawks won a few games they didn't need to win, and their chances are now at like 14%, and they could have been 18 You know, man, that could make a difference. And I want Connor Bedard. I think he really jumpstarts or he really launches the rebuilding effort in Chicago of a team that did win 3 Stanley Cup championships and whatever, 10, 13, and 15, and now Patrick Kane is gone and all that. But if I take myself out of it, Florida's the biggest story, Tony. They've taken a 3-0 lead on Toronto, and they just smacked them down. Toronto finally gets through a first-round series, and they meet Florida 1 year removed from President's Trophy, and it's just pop, 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 pop. So I'd say, you know, if you take my sentiment out of it for tonight, and I will be watching that lottery, it'd be Florida.
Here are the notes that I have. I assumed you'd say the draft because the Blackhawks were involved.
Yeah.
Every single day we've done this show, you have defamed the NFL draft except this year because the Bears had the #1 pick for an hour and a half before they traded
That's right.
Now, in the long term, you may be right. If Bedard is as good as the other Connor McDavid, you may very well be right. What you are completely right about is that in this moment, it's Florida. Florida beat the Bruins, the best team in the league, 3 in a row. They have now taken the 4th best team in the league, Toronto, and beaten them 3 in a row at this point. There's going to be, you know, just despair again in Toronto. They finally won a playoff series for the first time in 19 years. They beat a good team, Tampa Bay, a 2-time Cup team, and now they can't get a game off the #8. So it's like 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And by the way, if Edmonton plays 15 games, Draisaitl will smash the playoff record of 19 goals. Let's take a break. Coming up, is Jimmy Irsay right to be upset about Washington's reported outreach to Andrew Luck?
And the Cardinals signed.
It's mail time, where you do the work our producers are being paid for. Let me get the first one. Mail time? This is a long one. Is Colts owner Jim Irsay right to make a fuss about the Commanders, I hate that name, reportedly sniffing around Andrew Luck last offseason?
Tony, you know what? Whenever Jimmy Irsay is in the news, you know, my instinct is to just sort of make fun of him. But I'm sorry, if he is, well, I'm going to use this word carefully, property of the Indianapolis Colts, even though he's like 4 years into retirement and other teams can't do this because that's tampering, then he's within his rights. I mean, it may seem cheesy and it may seem very Jimmy Irsay-like and petty and all that, but if other teams are supposed to have to get permission by rule to talk to anyone still under control of Jimmy Irsay and the Colts, then yes, he's within his rights.
Yeah, it's self-congratulatory, but it is tampering. There's no question that it's tampering if you go make a contact with a guy who's still under contract for whatever reason. Now, Jimmy Irsay has a chance to run his mouth, and Mike, he's got a chance to run his mouth against the still owner of the Washington football team, Dan Snyder, who he has already publicly said should be voted out of the league. So I know that makes him happy. The story here to me is they went after Andrew Luck. Like they were so desperate, they went after a guy who was out of the league for 4 years and then settled with the same team by trading for Carson Wentz, who didn't even, you know, isn't any good for them. I mean, if you're, Mike, if your move is to go after Andrew Luck, what's your next move? To go after Joe Montana? I mean, come on. What are you doing?
It may be.
What do you make of the Cardinals taking Wilson Contreras out of his catcher role for which they signed him?
It's just very un-Cardinal-like. It speaks of a certain desperation. Oh, wait, the Cardinals are something like. I know at one point they were 10-22. I don't know what they are at the moment. But Tony Contreras, I mean, there were deficiencies defensively that everybody in Chicago knew about Contreras. Wonderful hitting catcher, wonderful teammate. I mean, he wasn't loved in Chicago. He was beloved. And beloved in that dugout and that clubhouse. And it was, I mean, people shed tears to see him leave. But nobody was going to say that he was Roy Campanella, Johnny Bench, I'll update only about 20 years, as a defensive catcher. So the Cardinals, they're just finding this out. They played against him like 18 times a year. They're just finding it out. I don't. This doesn't seem like the Cardinals' usually stellar scouting.
They are right now 11-24. They're the worst team in the National League. They're worse than the Washington Nationals, which surprised me. I know you hate the Cardinals, but let's go to this. They signed Contreras for 5 years, $87.5 million. They specifically signed him to take Yadier Molina's place when Yadier Molina retired.
That's the problem.
And as you say, they had to know he was a bad defensive catcher because they played against him 19 times every single year in the same division. So you can't say, whoa, he's a bad catcher. And what makes it worse is the pitch clock, Mike, because the pitches keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. If you're a bad defensive catcher, it doesn't work. He's now on pace for 9 home runs. He's a very expensive DH. It ain't working. Enough email. Let's take one last break. Still to come. Will your Knicks win tonight to keep them going down 3-1 to the Heat?
And which Warriors team is going to show up against the Lakers tonight? When you have Yadier Molina, who's going to the Hall of Fame, I guess the Cardinals got buyer's remorse, and they said, oh, wait, this guy isn't Yadier
Smith. Lovey was fired as head coach of the Houston Texans last January, hours after the Texans finished 3-13-1. But he was not fired before winning the last game of the season over Indianapolis, thus depriving the Texans of the overall #1 pick in the draft, sliding it to the Bears, who eventually traded it to Carolina. Speculation will forever center on whether the Texans would have drafted quarterback Bryce Young with that pick. The Panthers took Young, leaving C.J. Stroud to the Texans. Lovey had previously been head coach at Tampa Bay and Chicago, who he led to the 2007 Super Bowl, that we at PTI like to call the Rex Grossman Super Bowl, even though you insist Rex Grossman was never in a Super Bowl.
No, of course he was in the Super Bowl. He started for the team at quarterback. Lovie Smith never should have been fired. The Bears made a huge, historic mistake in firing him. They should have said to him and his challenged offense, we're going to hire somebody or make you hire somebody, say North Turner, who is only brilliant at it at a number of stops, and pair you guys, and you're going to do this and get it right and beat the people up north in Green Bay. Lovey was a terrific coach on a lot of levels, terrific, and he never should have been fired.
Happy anniversary, Brewers and White Sox. On this day 39 years ago, Milwaukee and Chicago faced each other at Comiskey Park. With the game tied 3-3 after 17 innings, it was suspended at 1 a.m. until the following evening. When play resumed, the game went on for another 8 innings until Harold Baines hit a walk-off home run to give the Pale Hose a 7-6 win in the bottom of the 25th inning. The bat Baines used is in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. This is the longest game in terms of actual time in MLB history, 8 hours, 6 minutes. This record is unlikely to ever be broken now the teams start the 10th inning of a tie game with a runner at second base.
Hall of Famer Harold Baines. And by the way, Tony, the Cubs were involved yesterday in the longest game this season, 14 innings. So that's a long way from 25. Nobody wants to see that. That's just, ooh, man.
25 is a lot. A melancholy trails the Vida Blue. The one-time pitching phenom of the Oakland A's died Saturday at 73. Blue debuted in the majors at 19 and the next year pitched a 9-strikeout no-hitter against Minnesota. Blue was on 3 World Series champions and won 20 games 3 different times. His best season was 1971 when he was 24-8 with a 1.82 ERA and 24 complete games. He won both the American League MVP and Cy Young that season. Blue pitched for 17 seasons with Oakland, San Francisco, and Kansas City, had a career record of 209 and 161 with a 3.27 ERA. But his reputation was marred by drug and alcohol use that he believed, and I'm quoting here, impeded my road to the Hall of Fame, unquote.
Tony, how about that leg kick and wind up? How about that? I'm so obsessed with starting pitching now and the absence of starting pitching and the result of great starting pitching, like generated by Vida Blue. 24 complete games in 1 year. There ain't going to be 24 complete games in the major leagues this year. Vida Blue, and he was so entertaining, and so young a man at 73.
Let's go to the big finish if we could. The Devils beat the Canes 8-4 yesterday. The Kraken beat the Stars 7-2, which was more impressive.
Oh, the Devils. They've been outscored 11-2 in their first 2 games, both losses in Carolina. Oh, the Devils. Mage won the Kentucky Derby. Break it down for us.
Yeah, it was really a great race. The last quarter mile was fantastic. My friend Eddie had this right. I'd like to see Mage against Forte in the Preakness. By the way, more people watch this than anything since the Super Bowl. Ronnie James decided to attend USC. Is that a good choice?
Is it going to USC for any reason a good choice? I would say so, particularly when you already live in Southern California. You got lots of choices. It's a great one. The Pirates have suddenly lost 7 straight. What happened after all that slurping?
Yeah, well, they played good teams. They played Tampa Bay and Toronto. That's what happened. Last one, Knicks Heat, Warriors Lakers tonight. Who you got?
Knicks even that series. Warriors even that series. 2 great games. Scott Foster at Warriors Lakers. What do you get lost on the way to Phoenix? By the time I get to Phoenix, I can't find Chris Paul to hang an L on him. I'm just saying.
We're out of time. We'll try and do better the next time. And I'm Tony Kornheiser.
I'm Mike Wilbon.